She had his dead wife's face, and she fired him before he could even speak. Grayson Hale walked into that office expecting a routine meeting with the company's new CEO. What he found instead stopped his heart cold. Same eyes, same jaw, same small scar above the left brow that he had kissed 1,000 times. 5 years of grief hit him like a freight train in 3 seconds flat. And before he could breathe, before he could say a single word, she looked up from her desk and told him to clean out his locker. If a story like this has ever left you speechless, hit that like button right now, drop your city in the comments below, and stay with me until the very last word, because this one is going to take you somewhere you didn't expect. The alarm went off at 6:14 in the morning, same as always, and Grayson Hale was already awake. He lay flat on his back, staring at the water stain on the ceiling, the one shaped vaguely like a boot, the one he kept telling himself he'd paint over someday. And he listened to the apartment breathe around him, the radiator ticking, a bus groaning past 4 floors below, and from down the hall, the small, rustling sounds of Lily beginning to wake up, the way she always did, gradually and reluctantly, like a tide coming in. He had maybe 8 minutes before she called for him. He used 5 of them just lying there. This was something no one warned you about when you lost someone. Not the big grief, not the crying in the car kind, or the can't get out of bed kind. Those things people talked about. What they didn't talk about was the quiet version. The version that just sat with you in the mornings, unhurried and patient, like it owned the place. The version that let you function, let you make lunches and sign permission slips and show up to work on time, but never fully left the room. 5 years. He still woke up on his side of the bed. Daddy. Lily's voice came floating down the hall, not urgent, just an announcement. She did this every morning, called out once to confirm he existed, then waited. I'm up, he called back. He wasn't, technically, but he swung his legs over the edge and sat up, and that counted. By 7:15, Lily was at the kitchen table eating toast with too much peanut butter on it, and Grayson was making coffee with the focus of a man defusing a bomb. The machine was old and temperamental. It made a sound like a small animal being stepped on before it cooperated. And Grayson had learned through painful experience that if you didn't hold the filter basket at exactly the right angle, the whole thing would spit hot coffee grounds across the counter. Mrs. Patterson said we're doing the science fair in April, Lily said, not looking up from her toast. Good. I want to do mine on something that explodes. Let's talk about that later. You always say that, because it's always a good answer. Lily made a face that looked exactly like something Claire would have done. That particular combination of exasperation and amusement, lips pressed together, eyebrows just slightly raised. And Grayson turned back to the coffee machine so she wouldn't see his expression shift. 7 years old. She was 7 years old and she already had her mother's way of looking at him like he was being mildly ridiculous, and she was generously allowing it. He poured his coffee, drank half of it standing at the counter. I have that meeting today, he said. After school, Mrs. Kim is going to pick you up, okay? I'll get you from her place before dinner. The new boss meeting? Yeah. Are you nervous? He looked at her. She was watching him now with that steady, old soul attention she'd had since she was 3 years old, like she was collecting data. No, he said. Lily nodded slowly, in the way that meant she didn't entirely believe him, but was choosing not to press it. Smart kid. Too smart sometimes. Okay, she said, and went back to her toast. The meeting wasn't until 2 o'clock, but the news about it had been circling Callaway and Vance since Monday, which meant by Thursday morning the entire building knew something was happening. People stood in clusters near the elevators, talking in that particular half-whispered, half-normal register that meant they wanted to be overheard discussing the situation without technically being caught gossiping. Grayson walked past 2 separate conversations about the acquisition, caught fragments, restructuring, new leadership, whole department, and went straight to his desk. He'd been with Callaway and Vance for 6 years. Infrastructure project management, mid-level, which meant he was senior enough to know what was going on and junior enough that nobody consulted him about it. The firm had been bought out 3 months ago by Cross Capital Enterprises, a private equity group out of Chicago. And the general consensus among the staff was that the new ownership was going to clean house, which either meant layoffs or a complete operational overhaul. And Grayson had been running quiet calculations for weeks, trying to figure out which scenario was more likely and how bad either one would be. The answer, both times, was pretty bad. He had one kid, one aging car, one apartment that was barely big enough, and a savings account that could survive about 4 months if things went sideways. He was not in a position to take risks. He never was, not anymore. That was the thing about being the only parent. Every decision had a second weight attached to it. Hail! Marcus, from the desk 2 rows over, appeared at his elbow. Marcus was one of those people who wore his anxiety like a badge of honor, like if he worried hard enough about something, it would respect him for the effort. You get the summons too. 2 o'clock, Grayson said. Same. You know what it's for? No. I heard Paulson got his yesterday, walked out of there looking like he'd seen a ghost. Marcus lowered his voice. I heard they're replacing the entire project management tier. You heard that? Or someone told you that? Or you're constructing a scenario? Marcus pointed at him. See, that's your problem. You don't take these things seriously. I take it seriously. I'm just not running scenarios until I have data. You're going to walk in there at 2 o'clock completely unprepared. I'm going to walk in there at 2 o'clock and find out what's actually happening, Grayson said. There's a difference. Marcus retreated, unconvinced. Grayson opened his project files and tried to concentrate. He managed it for about 40 minutes before he found himself staring at the same paragraph without reading it and closed the screen. The new CEO's office was on the 14th floor, which had been cleared out and quietly renovated over the past 6 weeks. Grayson had never been up there during the changeover, but he'd heard things. New furniture, new layout, the whole floor essentially rebuilt, which was either completely normal for an incoming executive or a very deliberate statement, depending on how you read it. He signed in with the assistant at the desk outside, gave his name, and sat in the waiting area. It was the kind of space designed to make you aware of your own smallness, without overtly trying to. High ceilings, sparse furniture, no magazines or distractions. Just clean lines and quiet. 2 other people had been through before him. Neither one had come back out the main door while he was waiting, which probably meant there was a secondary exit, which probably meant the CEO didn't want people comparing notes in the hallway after. Grayson filed that away. At 2:03, the assistant told him to go in. He stood up, straightened his jacket, pushed the door open. The office was large and organized with the precision of someone who thought in systems. Everything had a place, and everything was in it. There was a broad desk near the windows overlooking the city, a small conference table to one side, shelves along the back wall lined with bound reports and neatly labeled folders. The afternoon light came in flat and cool. The city spread out beyond the glass like something permanent. The woman behind the desk was reading something on her screen and hadn't looked up yet. And Grayson stopped walking. He stopped because his body stopped, before his mind caught up with the reason. She was in a wheelchair, positioned slightly to one side of the desk, and she was leaning forward with one arm resting on the armrest. And she was wearing a gray jacket, and her dark hair was pulled back, and the angle of her jaw and the line of her nose and the way her fingers rested against the edge of the desk. He heard his own breathing change. She looked up. The world went sideways, same eyes. The exact shape of them, the exact color, dark brown with that particular warmth in the irises that he had looked into 10,000 times. The same jaw, clean and precise. The same small structure of her face, cheekbones placed just so, and above her left brow, half hidden by a strand of hair that had come loose, a small, pale scar. He had kissed that scar. He had kissed it on a Tuesday morning in March 5 years ago, 3 hours before the call came in, before the hospital, before everything that came after. He had kissed it and told Claire she had the best face he'd ever seen, and she had told him he was biased, and he had said absolutely, and they had laughed. He had kissed that scar. Mr. Hale. Her voice was not Claire's voice. It was lower, more controlled, the warmth that Claire had in hers replaced with something cooler, more measured. But the face. Mr. Hale. She said it again, and he realized she had been watching him stand there motionless for what must have been several very long seconds. Her expression was unreadable. Not unkind, but not warm either. Clinical. Waiting. He made himself walk to the chair across from her desk. He sat down. His hands were flat on his thighs, and he made himself keep them there. "Vivian Cross," she said, not offering her hand. "I've been reviewing the team structures on this floor." He nodded. He was still looking at her face. He couldn't stop doing it. She noticed. Something shifted in her expression. Not offense exactly, but a kind of registered irritation. "Is there a problem?" "No." The word came out too quickly. "Sorry. No. I'm listening." She held his gaze for a moment longer, assessing, then looked down at the folder open on her desk. "Your file. 6 years with the firm, project management, mid-tier. Your evaluations are consistently good. No disciplinary issues. You've managed 4 major infrastructure accounts." "That's right." "The cross-capital restructure is going to consolidate your department with the one in the Chicago office. Operationally, that means we need one coordinated team rather than 2 separate ones." She turned a page. "Your role as it currently exists will not continue." Grayson heard the words. They landed somewhere, registered somewhere. But the larger part of his attention was doing something else entirely. Running over her face like a man trying to find a flaw in something that should not be flawless. Searching for the detail that would make this make sense. A different angle, a different light. Something that would reduce this to resemblance instead of duplication. There was no flaw. There was no detail. It was the same face. "Mr. Hale?" He pulled his attention back. "You're letting me go. The role is being eliminated." She said it the way you say a fact, without apology, without softening. "HR has a package prepared. You'll have until the end of the month to wrap your current projects. Full severance per your contract." "Right." He heard his own voice like it was coming from someone nearby. "Okay. Any questions?" He had about 40 questions, and exactly none of them were about severance. "No," he said. "I think I've got it." She nodded once and looked back at her screen. Dismissed. He stood up, walked to the door. His hand found the handle. "Mr. Hale?" He stopped, turned. She was still looking at her screen. "I'm sorry about the position. It's not a reflection of your work." "Thank you." He waited because something in him refused to just leave. "Have we—" He stopped himself. She looked up. "Have we what?" He shook his head. "Nothing. Thank you for your time." He walked out. The door closed behind him. He stood in the hallway outside in front of the elevator and pressed the button and stared at the floor indicator without seeing it. The elevator came. He got in. He pressed 4. He stood in the elevator with his back against the wall and his eyes on the ceiling and something in his chest that felt very much like the thing he had worked 5 years to keep from feeling. He didn't go back to his desk. He walked past it to the men's room at the end of the hall, went into the last stall, and stood there for a while doing nothing in particular except trying to get his breathing under control. It was a face. That was all. It was a face that resembled another face. There were people in the world who looked like other people. It happened all the time, and it didn't mean anything, and it wasn't a message or a sign or anything other than a coincidence of biology. The world was full of faces, and faces recurred. He had read something once about how everyone had a statistical doppelganger somewhere. It was science. It was genetics. It was nothing. He was losing his job. That was the actual situation. That was the concrete, real, practical situation he needed to deal with. He had a child to support, a lease coming up for renewal, and as of the end of the month, no income. That was what required his attention. He walked out of the bathroom, sat at his desk, and opened his files. He worked until 6. Mrs. Kim lived 3 blocks away, a small Vietnamese woman in her 70s who had watched Lily on and off since Lily was 2, and who treated the arrangement with the calm authority of a grandmother who happened to be contracted. She opened the door before Grayson knocked. She had some instinct about it, always had. And Lily appeared immediately behind her, backpack over one shoulder and something in her expression that meant she had news. "We made soup," Lily announced. "It was nothing," Mrs. Kim said, already handing Grayson a Tupperware container. "You look tired." "I'm fine." "You look very tired." Grayson took the soup. Thank you, Mrs. Kim. He loaded Lily into the car, buckled her in, started the engine. She waited until they'd been moving about 2 minutes before she asked, "How was it?" "Fine." "Did you get good news or bad news?" He glanced at her in the rearview mirror. She was watching him, chin slightly up, that same patient waiting she always did when she already suspected the answer. "Bad news," he said. She nodded. "Okay." A pause. "How bad?" "I'm losing my job." She thought about this for a block and a half. "But you'll get another one," she said finally. Not a question exactly, more like a decision she was making on his behalf. "Yeah," he said. "I will." "Okay," she said again, and looked out the window. "Can we have the soup for dinner?" "Yes." "Mrs. Kim makes it better than you." "Yeah, she does." He put Lily to bed at 8:30, read her 2 chapters of the book they were working through, something with a dragon and a girl who kept making catastrophically bad decisions that somehow turned out right in the end, and stayed until her breathing deepened and evened out. He went to the kitchen, poured himself a glass of water, stood at the counter, and looked at the dark window. Claire had died on a Tuesday afternoon in March, 5 years ago, in a car accident 3 miles from their apartment. She had been 27 years old, Lily had been 2. Grayson had been 27 himself, and the thing about losing someone at 27 is that you haven't built up enough life yet to absorb it properly. You don't have enough scar tissue, enough distance, enough years of practice at difficult things. You're still new at being yourself, and suddenly the version of yourself you were building with this other person doesn't exist anymore, and you have to figure out, on the fly, what you are without it, while also keeping a 2-year-old alive. He had managed, mostly. Not gracefully. Not without falling apart in bathrooms and cars, and once, memorably, in a grocery store aisle, in front of a display of the particular brand of coffee Claire had liked. But he had managed. He had learned to maintain. He had learned to keep the grief at a functional distance, the way you learn to work with an old injury. You know it's there. You work around it. You stop expecting it to completely go away. He had not expected to see her face. He had not expected that. And the thing that was worse, the thing he couldn't shake, was not just the resemblance, it was the scar, that specific small scar, a distinguishing mark, the kind of thing that didn't just recur by coincidence. He picked up his phone, put it down, picked it up again. He opened his photos and scrolled back. 5 years, 6 years. The photos from before. Claire at the beach in July, laughing at something he'd said, caught slightly off balance, the sun behind her. Claire in the kitchen on a Sunday morning, still in her pajamas, pointing a spatula at him with an expression of deep authority. Claire sitting in the hospital 2 weeks before Lily was born, looking at the camera with a kind of exhausted brightness, already in love with a person she hadn't quite met yet. He stopped on one, a close-up, taken on their 3rd anniversary, the light from a restaurant candle making her face warm and close. She was looking directly at the camera, and the angle caught the left side of her face cleanly. The scar above her brow, small and pale, visible if you knew to look for it. He set the phone down. It was late. He needed to sleep. He needed to figure out his next employment move and his finances and a dozen other things that were more immediately pressing than whatever this was. He did not sleep for a long time. He went back on Friday. He knew it was a bad idea. He had known it since approximately 4 o'clock Thursday morning, when he'd made the decision while staring at the ceiling, and he had still not found a good argument against it. He told himself it was about the job, a follow-up question, a clarification about the transition timeline, something plausible. He dressed like it was a normal workday, which technically it still was, for the next 3 weeks at least. The assistant on 14 told him Ms. Cross wasn't available without an appointment. "I just need 5 minutes," Grayson said. "It's about the transition details. Something we didn't cover yesterday." The assistant, young, professionally neutral, looked uncertain. "I can schedule something for next week. It'll take 5 minutes." A pause. The assistant picked up the phone, spoke quietly, listened, set it down. "She'll see you. 10 minutes." He went in. Vivian Cross was at her desk again, but this time she was on a call and she held up one finger without looking up. 1 minute. He sat down in the same chair as yesterday and waited. took the time to look at her properly, which felt invasive but which he couldn't prevent himself from doing. Up close, the resemblance was even more precise than he'd clocked in the shock of first encounter. The bone structure was identical. The way her brow furrowed slightly when she was focused. Claire had done exactly that, a small vertical line just between her brows that appeared when she was working on something, the way she held her left hand flat against the desk when she was thinking. Small things. The things that don't make it into a description of a person, but that you carry in your body after years of watching someone. She finished her call and looked at him. "Mr. Hale, you said you had transition questions." "I don't," he said. A pause. Her expression didn't change, but something behind it sharpened. "I see. I'm sorry. I needed to come back, and I didn't know how to make that make sense without a reason, so I said I had questions about the transition. That was not a good approach." She studied him. The clinical patience from yesterday, but with something different underneath it now. Not quite curiosity, but the door to it, held slightly ajar. "What did you actually need?" He pulled out his phone. He had the photo ready. The restaurant photo, the anniversary one. He set it on the desk and turned it to face her, and he watched her face. She looked at it. The change was small. She was clearly someone who had built, over a long time, a very controlled relationship with her own reactions. But there it was. A barely visible tightening around her eyes, a stillness that was too complete, the kind of stillness that isn't calm, but its opposite. "Who is that?" Her voice was level. "Her name was Claire Hale. She was my wife." He paused. "She died 5 years ago." Vivian said nothing. She was still looking at the photo. "You can see why I came back," Grayson said. She turned the phone to face him, slowly. She had gone very still in the way that meant she was processing something she wasn't ready to name yet. "That's a strong resemblance," she said finally. "Vivian." He didn't plan to use her first name. It came out of its own accord and he saw her register it. "I'm sorry, that's not how I meant." He stopped, started again. "I know how this looks. I'm not trying to—" He struggled for the right word. "Project anything. I know she's not here. I know that. But you have a scar above your left eyebrow in the same position as hers. That's not a resemblance. I don't know what that is." She didn't answer immediately. She picked up a pen, held it, set it back down. "I don't know you," she said. "I've never met you before this week." "I know. Whatever resemblance you see, do you have any memories you can't explain?" The question landed in the air between them and stayed there. Her expression shifted, very slightly and very briefly, but he was watching carefully enough to see it, a small fracture in the controlled surface, there and then gone. "That's not a relevant question," she said. "I know it sounds strange." He leaned forward slightly. "I know how this sounds, and I know I'm the man you fired yesterday, which means you have every reason to think this is, I don't know, a weird grief reaction or something worse, but you just had a reaction to that photo that you're not acknowledging, and I think you know you did." Silence. "I'm not asking for anything from you," he said. "I'm not going to make this weird I'm not confused about who you are. I'm not looking for a replacement. I can't walk away from this without understanding it." She was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice had lost some of its corporate precision. "Not much, but some." "I have recurring dreams," she said. "They started when I was in my early 20s. I've had them analyzed. I've been to people about them." A pause. "They're very specific." He waited. "A house," she said. "Small, 2 floors, brick. A kitchen with yellow light. A child's laughter, somewhere down a hallway. A man." She stopped. "I never see his face clearly." Grayson said nothing. "They're not memories," she said, and there was something in her voice that sounded like she'd said this to herself many times before and was trying to make it stick. "They're just dreams." "What color is the kitchen light?" he said. She looked at him. "In the dream." "The kitchen. What color?" "Yellow," she said. "I already said—" "We had a lamp," he said. "In the kitchen of our first apartment. A second-hand thing Claire found at a flea market. Warm-toned bulb, This particular shade of yellow. She loved it. We kept it even when we moved. He stopped. Not a match, probably. Yellow kitchens exist everywhere. She was staring at him with an expression he couldn't read. Is there a tree? He said. Outside a window. A big one, kind of lopsided. Something went through her face. She looked away from him, toward the window, and for a moment the CEO was entirely gone, and there was just a person sitting there, thrown off their footing and trying not to show it. I need you to leave now, she said. Quiet. Not harsh, but firm. He stood up. I understand. I'm not, she started, then stopped. I don't know what this is. Neither do I. He picked up his phone. But I think you know it's something. He left. In the elevator, his hands were steady. His chest was not. He didn't hear from her over the weekend. He hadn't expected to. He spent Saturday taking Lily to the park, pushing her on the swings while she made ambitious claims about how high she wanted to go, then watching her eat an ice cream cone with the focused dedication she brought to things she loved. He spent Sunday looking at job listings and updating his resume and thinking, between postings, about a woman with his dead wife's face telling him about a dream of yellow kitchen light and a lopsided tree. Their first apartment had had a lopsided elm tree visible from the kitchen window. He had always meant to mention it to the landlord. He never had. He didn't know what that proved. He also didn't know what it would mean if it proved anything, and that was the part he couldn't look at directly yet. The implications. Because there were only a few explanations for what was happening, and most of them were impossible. And the one that wasn't impossible was the kind of thing you didn't get to think about casually, sitting at a kitchen table on a Sunday night with a job listing open on your screen and the sounds of your daughter sleeping down the hall. If Vivian Cross and Claire had been... He closed the laptop. He went to bed. He lay in the dark and thought about a small scar and a particular quality of yellow light, and the way grief sometimes finds new shapes to live in. On Monday, there was an email in his work inbox. Mr. Hale, I've had our legal team confirm that adoption records in Illinois are subject to disclosure under certain circumstances. I've also contacted the agency that handled my adoption, which I have not done before. I don't know what I expect to find. I'm not making any promises about what this means. But I thought you should know. V. Cross. He read it 3 times, then he sat very still for a moment in the gray morning quiet of his apartment, with the sounds of Lily beginning to wake up filtering down the hall, and something shifting in his chest that he hadn't felt in a long time. Something that wasn't quite hope and wasn't quite grief, but lived in the uncertain territory between the two. He typed back, "Thank you. I'll wait to hear from you." He hit send. Then he got up and went to make coffee and called down the hall that breakfast was happening and listened to the familiar sounds of his daughter getting up and getting going. Outside the window, the city was waking up, indifferent and steady and alive. The same as every other morning. Nothing was the same as every other morning. The email sat in Vivian's sent folder for 2 days before she let herself think about what it meant that she had sent it. She was not an impulsive person. That was not a character trait she had ever been accused of. Not by the people who worked for her. Not by the board members who had watched her turn 3 failing acquisitions around in 4 years. Not by anyone who had spent more than 40 minutes in her presence. Vivian Cross made decisions, but she made them after she had the information, after she had run the numbers, after she had identified every possible way a situation could go wrong and constructed a plan for each one. That was how she operated. That was, if she was honest with herself, how she survived. Sending that email had been none of those things. She had sent it at 11:40 on a Friday night, sitting alone in her office after everyone else had gone home, with a photograph of a dead woman's face still open on her phone. She picked up the photograph twice on Saturday and put it down twice. On Sunday, she put it in a drawer and went back to working through the Q2 reports, which was something she was actually equipped to deal with. On Monday morning, Grayson Hale replied, "Thank you. I'll wait to hear from you. No pressure, no questions she wasn't ready for. Just, I'll wait." She found that more unsettling than she expected. GUM. The adoption agency was called Meridian Family Services, and it no longer operated under that name. It had been absorbed by a larger organization in 2008, and the records it held had been transferred to a state archive in Springfield, Illinois, which had then undergone a digital migration project that had, according to the archivist she eventually reached on the phone, experienced what he described as some data loss and organizational challenges. He said this with the particular exhaustion of a man who had been explaining the same failure for years and had run out of ways to apologize for it. What does that mean for records from 1994, Vivian asked. It means some records are complete, some are partial, and some were lost in the migration. It depends entirely on the specific case. My case. Yes, ma'am. I'd need your file number to look anything up. She had the file number. She'd found it, after 2 hours of searching, in a folder her mother had kept in a filing cabinet that Vivian had inherited along with the house and everything in it. Her mother had died 4 years ago, quietly and at home, the way she had lived. Her father had gone when Vivian was 11, and her mother had raised her alone for the rest of it. Vivian had gone through the filing cabinet once, after the funeral, cataloged everything, and put it in storage. She had not been looking for the adoption file. She had not been ready to look for the adoption file. She read the file number to the archivist. He typed. She listened to the sound of it. "I've got something here," he said, "but the file is partial. Medical and procedural records are present. Background information on the birth family is not. Not present or not recorded? Not present. Whether it was recorded originally and lost or never recorded, I can't tell you." A pause. "I can send you what we have." "Please," she said. She sat for a while after she hung up in her office, very still. Out the window, the city was doing its thing, movement and light and indifference. She had looked at this view from this building for 3 months now, and she still found it slightly unfamiliar, which she attributed to the fact that she was still calibrating, still adjusting to the new office and the new city after Chicago. She had come to this city for the acquisition. She had come to this building for the work. She had not come to find out that a man she fired might have been married to her sister. She said the word to herself quietly in the empty office. Sister. Tried it on. It fit poorly, the way a word does when you've never used it in connection with yourself before. She put the word away. She called her mother's oldest friend, a woman named Dorothy Schiff, who was in her early 70s and had known Vivian since she was brought home from the hospital. Dorothy was one of those people who seemed to exist outside of time. She had been old to Vivian when Vivian was a child, and she was old to Vivian now, and she had the particular authority of someone who had watched you grow up and therefore knew things about you that you didn't know about yourself. "I need to ask you something about when I was adopted," Vivian said. Dorothy was quiet for a moment. "Your mother and I talked about whether someone should tell you more over the years." "Tell me what?" "Nothing specific, just—" Dorothy paused, and Vivian could hear her choosing words carefully. "Your mother was always worried that looking too hard would hurt you. She loved you very much, and she operated from fear sometimes, about losing things." Dorothy. "Yes. Was there any mention, ever, of siblings?" The silence was different this time, longer and with a texture to it. "Where's this coming from, Vivian? Please just answer the question." "I don't know the answer definitively. Your mother didn't speak much about the specifics of the adoption." Another pause. "But I will tell you that the one time I asked her, years ago, she said the situation had been complicated. She used the word complicated, and then she changed the subject, and I didn't push because she was clearly uncomfortable with it." Vivian breathed carefully through her nose. "Complicated. That's all she said." "All right." "Vivian," Dorothy's voice shifted, went softer. "Is everything okay? I'm looking into some things. I'll call you when I know more." She hung up and stared at the wall for 30 seconds. Then she picked up the phone again and called a private research firm she had used twice before for due diligence work, a firm that was excellent at finding things people didn't want found. She asked them to start with birth records, Illinois, 1994. She gave them her birthday. She told them to look for a match, Tiptrad. Grayson found out through a work email, a routine HR communication about the transition timeline, that his last official day would be in 3 weeks. 3 weeks of wrapping projects, transferring documentation, attending the kind of meetings that exist primarily to acknowledge that other meetings have concluded. He moved through it with the low-grade distraction of someone managing two separate situations at once, giving each one partial attention and doing justice to neither. Marcus had been let go as well, which he'd learned about secondhand and which turned out to be true, and Grayson had taken him for a beer on Thursday to sit in a loud bar and talk about what came next. Marcus was scared in a way that he expressed by being very loud about being fine, and Grayson had listened to it for 2 hours and then told him simply that it was okay to not be fine, which had caused Marcus to stop being loud and order another round and talk more quietly for a while about actual things. It wasn't complicated, it was just what you did. He had his own version of the same problem, structurally speaking. The financial math, the timeline, the questions about what came after. But he had built, over 5 years of solo parenting, a fairly functional relationship with uncertainty. You learned it the same way you learned everything else in this life, by having it forced on you enough times that you stopped treating it as an emergency and started treating it as the baseline condition. It was a Wednesday evening when Vivian called. Lily was at the table doing homework, second-grade math, which she found annoying, not because it was hard, but because it was slow. And Grayson was at the counter reading through job postings on his laptop when his phone buzzed with an unknown number. Something in him recognized it before the name registered. He picked it up. "Hale. It's Vivian Cross." A beat. "I have some information." He moved toward the hallway, away from Lily's earshot. "Okay. The adoption agency records are partial. Background information on the birth family is missing, possibly lost, possibly never recorded. I'm working with a private research firm now to run it from the other angle." She was speaking in the measured, controlled way she used in professional contexts, but there was something underneath it, a kind of careful management, the way you talk when you're holding something while you talk. "They found a birth record for me, which I already knew existed. What I didn't know was that there was a second birth record filed the same day, at the same hospital, for a baby girl." Grayson's hand tightened on the phone. "The second record lists a different family for placement," she said. "I don't have the name yet. The record is partially redacted, and we're working on getting the full disclosure. But same day, same hospital. Same day, same hospital, same attending physician." A pause. "It could be a coincidence. The firm said it's not unusual for multiple adoptions to be processed through the same doctor. But the attending physician was named in a lawsuit in 1998 regarding improper handling of adoption records. The suit was settled confidentially. He retired shortly after." Grayson leaned against the hallway wall. Down at the table, Lily muttered something under her breath about her math worksheet. "What does that mean?" he said. "The lawsuit. It could mean a lot of things. It could mean falsified records, coerced adoptions, separation of siblings without proper documentation. That was one of the allegations, that he had separated twins without informing either adoptive family." She stopped. "I'm not saying that's what happened. I'm saying it was alleged." The word twins sat in the air. Grayson didn't say anything. "I wanted you to know where things stood," Vivian said, "because you were the one who started this, and—" She seemed to catch herself on something. "I thought you deserved to know." "I appreciate that." A silence. Not uncomfortable exactly, but loaded. "How are you doing?" he said. A pause. Like the question surprised her, not because it was strange, but because she hadn't been expecting him to ask, or hadn't been expecting to have a reaction to it. "I'm working on it," she said, which was the most human thing he'd heard her say. "Yeah," he said. "Same. I'll be in touch when the firm has more." She paused again. "And Mr. Hale, I know the timing is what it is, but the decision about the position wasn't something I had discretion on. The restructure was already determined when I took the role." "I know that. I wanted to say it anyway." "Okay," he said, and then, "You can call me Grayson." Another pause. "I'll be in touch," she said, and hung up. He stood in the hallway for a moment. From the table came the particular frustrated pencil erasing sound of someone redoing a problem. "Dad," Lily called, "what's 7 times 8? He walked back into the kitchen. 56. "That's not right." "It is, though." Lily looked at her paper. back at him. Huh. She wrote it down with the air of someone reluctantly accepting information from an unreliable source. Grayson sat back down at the counter. He didn't open the laptop again. The research firm's full report came through 10 days later. Vivian read it at 6:30 in the morning, alone in her apartment, with coffee she wasn't drinking going cold on the table beside her. The second birth record named the Okafor family for placement, a couple in Ohio. A preliminary search of records for that name, that county, that decade produced 3 results. One was a different family entirely. One was incomplete. The third was a marriage record for a Daniel Okafor and Susan Park, 1991, followed by a death certificate, Susan Park Okafor, 1996. Cause of death, a medical complication. Age, 25. No subsequent records for a child in that household. The firm had noted in a single line at the bottom of that section, absence of subsequent records may indicate child was removed from the placement and readopted or placed in another arrangement. Additional search advised. Vivian sat with that for a long time. A woman who had died young. A child who had apparently disappeared from the records. A doctor who had settled a lawsuit about exactly this kind of case and then quietly retired. She thought about Claire Hale. Married young, died young, left a daughter and a husband behind. A woman with Vivian's face who had apparently grown up in this city, who had laughed in a kitchen with yellow light, and who had left behind enough of her presence in a small girl and a grief-worn man that those traces had led, in a roundabout and improbable way, to this morning, to this apartment, to Vivian sitting here reading a report that told her absolutely nothing for certain and everything by implication. She picked up her phone and called Grayson. It rang twice. "You're up early," he said, which told her he'd saved her number, which she noted and filed away. "I got the full report," she said. She heard something shift on his end. He was moving, probably away from wherever Lily was. She waited. "Tell me," he said. She told him. All of it. The second birth record, the Okafor family, Susan Park's death record in 1996, the missing subsequent records for the child, the note about possible readoption. She read it straight, the way you read data, because that was the only way she knew how to do this without losing the thread. When she finished, there was a long silence. "Claire was adopted," Grayson said. "She told me early on. She never knew much about her birth family. She'd looked a little when she was in her 20s and ran into dead ends. She stopped trying. She said she was happy with what she had." Vivian said nothing. "Her adoptive family was out of Ohio," he said. "She moved here for college. Her parents, the ones who raised her, they're both gone now." "The Okafor family," Vivian said. "Would that be familiar?" "That was her dad's name," Grayson said, and his voice went very quiet. "Daniel. Her dad's name was Daniel." The apartment was completely silent around Vivian. She was aware of the sound of her own breathing and the cold coffee and the light coming through the window at its morning angle. "Okay," she said, after a moment. "Okay," he said. Neither of them spoke for a while. "Vivian." His voice was careful, feeling out the ground. "I don't want to push you toward anything. This is a lot. And I know we're still two strangers, more or less. But I think we both know what this is pointing at." "I know what it's pointing at," she said. "I'm not there yet." "That's fine. I need more verification. I need actual confirmation, not a chain of implications." "I know. I'm not asking you to be anywhere you're not." "I'm going to pursue a DNA comparison," she said. "If you're willing, there are samples that Claire's medical records would have." "I have more than that," he said. "We had Lily's genetics done 2 years ago, a health screening thing. I have the results. Half her DNA is Claire's." Vivian absorbed that quietly. A child. Half one thing, half another. Somewhere in those results, if this was true, would be a pattern that matched something in Vivian's own biology. "All right," she said. "Let me arrange it. I'll use a lab that handles legal and medical grade analysis. The kind that can be used for official purposes if it comes to that. Whatever you need. I'll send you the details." She paused. "And Grayson." She used his name carefully, like something she was testing the weight of. "Thank you for not..." for giving me room on this. You'd tell me if I was pushing too hard, he said, with a directness that felt honest rather than presumptuous. I would, she said. Yes. She hung up, sat for a while in the morning light with the cold coffee and the report and the specific silence of someone who has just stepped off familiar ground and hasn't landed anywhere new yet. She almost canceled 3 times. The DNA appointment, a lab downtown with a genomic specialist she had vetted thoroughly. She had scheduled it, confirmed it, driven halfway there twice in the preceding week on other errands and thought, I could just not do this. I could keep the question open. The question, at least, was something she knew how to hold. The answer was not guaranteed to be something she knew how to hold. She had learned from a very young age to be precise about what she could and couldn't carry. That was not a deficiency. That was management. But she went. Grayson was already there when she arrived. He was standing near the entrance, not waiting in the exact spot, more in the general vicinity, the way people do when they don't want to look like they've been waiting. He was holding 2 paper coffee cups and looked slightly uncertain about whether offering her one would be welcome, which was such a human and unguarded expression that something in Vivian's chest shifted very slightly without her permission. She accepted the coffee. How long have you been here? About 10 minutes. He paused. I was going to be casual about that, but I got here early and that's just what happened. She almost smiled. Thank you for coming. Of course. The appointment was 40 minutes, a cheek swab for each of them, sample documentation, a conversation with the geneticist about the comparison parameters. Vivian asked clear and detailed questions, and the geneticist answered them without condescension, which she appreciated. Grayson answered his questions without embellishment and asked one follow-up that was actually useful. They were, she noticed, quite different people who happened to approach practical situations in a similar way. On the way out, they stood for a moment on the sidewalk outside, with the city moving around them and 2 weeks of accumulated implications sitting between them. Results in 5 to 7 business days, she said. Yeah. He looked at her, not the way he'd looked at her in those first moments in her office, that raw and helpless recognition. This was steadier. Seeing her as herself, she thought, or starting to. Are you okay? Ask me in 5 to 7 business days. Fair enough? He glanced down the street, then back at her. I know you're managing this the same way you manage everything else. That's fine. He stopped. Started again. I was married to someone who looked exactly like you for 6 years. I know what I felt and what I knew, and I also know you're not her. But I want you to know that whatever those results say, whatever this is or isn't, I'm not... He searched for the word. I'm not going to turn this into something uncomfortable. You don't have to worry about that. She looked at him steadily. I'm not worried about that. Okay. I am... She paused, and the honesty of it was slightly uncomfortable coming out of her mouth, which was how she knew it was real. I'm unsettled by how familiar you feel. That's strange to say. Yeah, he said. I know. I don't know what that means. I don't either, he said. We don't have to figure it out right now. She nodded once, pulled her coat closed. I'll let you know as soon as I have the results. She walked back to her car. She did not look back, because she didn't trust what her face might do if she did. 5 days later, early on a Tuesday morning, an email arrived from the lab with a secure document attachment. Vivian opened it at her desk. She read the summary paragraph, which was phrased in the careful language of genomic science, and which said, without the clinical vocabulary, exactly what she had already known it was going to say. She sat for a while, looked out the window. Then she picked up the phone and called Grayson. He answered on the second ring. It's confirmed, she said. A long silence. Not empty. Full of the kind of things that don't have words yet. Claire and I, Vivian said, we were identical twins. Another silence. She heard him exhale slowly, the sound of someone who had been carrying a weight and has just been told it was real, which is somehow heavier than not knowing. Yeah, he said, just that. The match probability is over 99%, she said, because that was the part she knew how to say. There's no ambiguity. Vivian, His voice was low and unsteady in a way she hadn't heard from him before. I'm sorry. I don't know what this is for you. I don't either, she said, and then quietly, I had a sister I never knew. She had not let herself say it out loud before. It felt different outside of her head, more real and worse, and somehow also like something that had always been true, and she was only just being told. She would have, Grayson started, stopped. Don't, Vivian said gently but clearly. Not right now. I can't do that right now. Okay. His voice steadied itself. Okay. I understand. She looked out the window at the city, at the indifferent, ordinary Tuesday morning spread out below her. A sister. 30 years of a life, and all this time, somewhere in the world, her face had been on another person. Someone had loved it and built a family around it, and she had never known. I need a day, she said. And then she stopped, reorganized. I'd like to know more about her, if you're willing. Yeah, Grayson said. I'm willing. His voice caught slightly. I have a lot to tell you. I know you do, she breathed. Tomorrow. We can talk tomorrow. She hung up. She sat alone in her office for a long time with the confirmed document open on her screen and let herself feel the size of the thing, not managing it, not filing it, just sitting with it. It was the hardest thing she'd done in years, and she had done a lot of hard things, but she sat with it, and she didn't look away. They met at a coffee shop 2 blocks from the office. Neutral ground, Vivian's suggestion, which Grayson understood without her having to explain it. Her office carried too much context. His territory was too unfamiliar. A coffee shop was just a coffee shop, a place where nobody had power over anybody, and the worst thing that could happen was bad espresso. He was there when she arrived, same as the lab. She was starting to understand that he was consistently early to things, which was a trait that either meant anxiety or conscientiousness, and in his case appeared to be the latter. He had a coffee already and was looking at his phone without really seeing it, the way people do when they're using a screen as an excuse not to look like they're waiting. She sat down across from him. You okay? He said. No, she said, but I'm here. He nodded like that was a reasonable answer, which it was. She had ordered at the counter on her way in. She had learned, early in her career, to always have something to do with her hands in difficult conversations, and a coffee cup worked well. And she wrapped both hands around it now and looked at him. He looked tired. Not the acute tired of someone who hadn't slept, but the deeper tired of someone who had spent 24 hours processing something large and hadn't finished processing it. You said you had a lot to tell me, she said. Yeah. He exhaled, sat back. Where do you want me to start? From the beginning, whatever the beginning means to you. He thought about that for a moment. The beginning is probably when Claire told me she was adopted, he said. We'd been together about 8 months. It came up kind of sideways. We were talking about family medical history, one of those conversations you have when things get serious, and she mentioned it matter-of-factly like it was just a piece of information. She said she'd tried to look into her birth family once, when she was 22. Hit dead ends. Her adoptive parents hadn't known much. They said the agency had told them the situation was complicated, that there was limited background information. He paused. She used that word too, complicated. Vivian said nothing. Dorothy had used the same word. Her mother's oldest friend describing what Vivian's mother had said once about the adoption. She made her peace with it, Grayson continued. That was Claire's way. She didn't fight things she couldn't change. She found a way to work with what she had. She was better at that than me. Something moved through his face. She had a good life. She was happy. I want you to know that. Vivian watched him carefully. Why do you want me to know that? He met her eyes. Because she was your sister, and you never got to know her. And I thought, I don't know. Maybe it helps, knowing she wasn't out there somewhere being miserable. It didn't help exactly, but she understood why he'd offered it, and she appreciated the intention. Tell me what she was like, she said. Not the loss, her. He took a breath, and then he talked. He talked for a long time, not linearly, not with any particular structure, just the way people talk when they've been carrying someone in their memory for a long time and have been waiting, without knowing they were waiting, for a reason to let it out. Claire had studied architecture, had pivoted midway through to urban planning because, she had told him, she was more interested in how people move through spaces than in the spaces themselves. She'd been a ferocious, terrible cook who refused to concede this and kept attempting dishes that were beyond her skill level, and roughly 1 meal in 3 was genuinely inedible, and she treated those failures with a complete absence of embarrassment that Grayson had found both baffling and deeply attractive. She had a stubborn streak that emerged in specific contexts. She was fine with being wrong about things she didn't care about, and completely immovable about things she did. She read fast and remembered everything she read. She cried easily at things that surprised her, and rarely at things that were meant to be sad. She was, he said, the most fundamentally decent person he had known in his life, in the way that means not just kind, but honest. Someone whose default was to tell the truth, even when it was inconvenient, including to herself. Vivian listened to all of it with her hands around the coffee cup and something in her chest doing something she didn't have a word for. Not grief exactly, because you can't grieve something you never had, but the shape of grief, the outline of it. "She sounds like someone I would have liked," she said finally. "Yeah," Grayson said. "I think you would have." He paused. "I think she would have liked you too. She would have been intrigued by you. She liked people who were harder to read." "I'm not trying to be hard to read." "I know. That's sort of the point." Vivian looked at her coffee. "Can I ask you something?" "Yeah." "Was she—" She stopped, reorganized. "The dreams I've had, the ones I told you about. The yellow kitchen, the child's laughter, the man whose face I couldn't see. Those dreams started when I was about 23, 24. I looked into it at the time. There are people who believe in genetic memory, cellular memory, things like that. I don't know what I believe about that." "What are you asking?" "I'm asking whether you think she was there, in those dreams, whether she knew I was somewhere." He was quiet for a moment. "I think," he said carefully, "that I'm not a person who has strong opinions about what the scientific community does and doesn't fully understand. And I think that Claire, on more than one occasion, told me she felt like there was someone missing from her life that she couldn't account for." He paused. "She thought she was describing something else. I did too at the time." Vivian absorbed that. She looked out the window at the street, people walking, a delivery truck double parked, a woman trying to manage a stroller and a phone call simultaneously, the ordinary chaos of a city morning. "We wasted 30 years, she said. Quiet. Not angry exactly, just stating a fact the way a fact sometimes lands. "We could have had 30 years. "Yeah." His voice was level, but the word cost him something. "That's the part I keep coming back to, too." A silence. A real one, the kind that isn't uncomfortable but isn't nothing either. "I want to know about you," Grayson said. "You've been asking about her. Tell me something about yourself." Vivian looked at him. "Why?" "Because you're not just her echo. Because you're a person, and I'm sitting across from you, and—" He stopped. "Just because." She thought about it. "I had a difficult relationship with my own body for a long time," she said. "I was born with a spinal condition, 2 surgeries by the time I was 14. The wheelchair is—" She paused. "It's partial. I can walk short distances. But by my mid-20s, the pain made it impractical for anything beyond that." She said it straightforwardly, the way she always did, armor built from repetition. "I spent a lot of years fighting it, trying to manage it away, treat it away, work around it. I eventually decided that energy was better spent on other things. That's not a small decision." "No, but it was the right one." She looked at him. "I built something because of it, not in spite of it. I learned early that I couldn't afford to be imprecise about what mattered. You find out very quickly, when your body doesn't cooperate, which things you actually care about and which things you are just doing out of habit." Grayson was quiet for a moment. "Claire had a back issue too," he said. "Nothing as significant, but she had this persistent lower back problem from her 20s. She was always dealing with it. She used to joke that she and her back had an agreement. She wouldn't do anything reckless, and it would mostly leave her alone. The coincidence of it landed between them without comment. Both of them were thinking it. Neither of them said it. "There's something else," Grayson said. "About the records. I don't know if it's useful, but—" He leaned forward slightly. "I looked into the attorney who handled Claire's adoption. Her parents had kept some records too. Basic things, not much detail. But I found a name. The attorney was listed as the facilitating legal counsel on the adoption paperwork, a man named Preston Wald." Vivian went still. "That name means something to me." "I thought it might. He's listed on your adoption record too, in the partial documents the archive sent you." "He is," she said slowly. "I missed it initially. His name appeared only once, in a footnote. I didn't connect it." She set down her coffee cup. "He's still practicing." "I know." She looked at Grayson for a long moment. "You did research." "Some," he said. "I didn't want to step on anything you were already doing, but I had time and He shrugged. "I needed to do something with my hands." She almost smiled again. It kept happening around him. Not fully, never quite breaking the surface, but a flicker of it, involuntary and slightly annoying. "Preston Wald," she said. "He practiced family and adoption law out of Springfield. He would have worked directly with the agency." A pause. "With the doctor who settled the lawsuit." "Right. If anyone has information about why we were separated, why the records were obscured, it's him," Grayson said. "Or it was. He's in his late 70s now. Still has a small practice, from what I could find. Mostly referrals." Vivian had already pulled out her phone. She was moving the way she moved when she'd identified the next step in a problem. Direct, no wasted motion. "I'll have my legal team contact him." "Vivian," Grayson's voice was careful. "This isn't a business negotiation." She looked up from the phone. He was watching her with an expression that was not critical but not neutral either, something in between, honest. "I know that," she said. "I know you know it. I just—" He chose his words. "He's an old man who made choices 30 years ago that he may or may not feel accountable for. Your legal team showing up is going to make him defensive, maybe silent. What would you suggest?" "I'd go myself," he said. "Or we'd go. Two people who are actually affected by what happened. Not attorneys, not investigators, just us." She looked at him steadily. The idea of walking into an old man's office and asking him to explain what he had done to her life without the armor of professional representation was not comfortable. It was, in fact, the kind of thing she generally avoided. Situations where her reaction couldn't be managed, where the variables were too human and too unpredictable. "That's not how I operate," she said. "I know. I've spent my entire career building systems specifically, so I don't have to operate that way." "I know that too. And you're still suggesting it." "Yeah," he said. She looked at him for a long time. He didn't fill the silence. She had noticed this about him. He could sit in silence without reaching for it, without rushing to manage it, which was rarer than it should be. "I'll think about it," she said. She thought about it for 4 days. On the 5th day, she called him and said, "Springfield, this weekend." He said, "Oh, I'll drive." She said, "I have a better car." He said, "I have no doubt." They drove to Springfield on a Saturday, which was a 3-hour drive, and the experience of being in a car for 3 hours with Grayson Hale was both less strange and more strange than Vivian had expected. Less strange because he turned out to be someone who didn't feel compelled to fill silence with noise, which meant they could go 30 or 40 minutes without speaking and it wasn't uncomfortable. More strange because every so often she would catch something in her peripheral vision, a gesture, a way he rested his arm on the window ledge, and she would feel, very briefly, the weight of everything she now knew he had lost. He told her about Lily on the drive. He hadn't talked about her much yet. Vivian had asked about Claire, and they had both been preoccupied with the logistics. But now he talked about her the way parents talk about their kids when they're not performing it, when they've just relaxed enough to let you see what's actually there. Lily was apparently a specific and unmistakable person. She had opinions about things that 7-year-olds didn't typically have opinions about. She had recently decided that clouds were underrated and had started keeping a cloud journal, which was a journal in which she noted, with some detail, interesting clouds she had observed that day. A cloud journal, Vivian said. Completely self-initiated, Grayson said. I found out when I was packing her bag for school and it was in there. She'd done 6 entries. What did you say? I said it was a good idea because... He glanced at her briefly. It is. She's paying attention to things. That's not nothing. No, Vivian said. It's not. She looked at the highway ahead of them. Lily, a child who kept a cloud journal, who had Claire's blood, and apparently Claire's particular way of noticing things that other people moved past. The thought sat at an angle she couldn't quite see directly. Preston Wald's office was in a low brick building near the edge of downtown Springfield, the kind of building that had been there for decades and was going to stay there through sheer stubbornness. The sign out front was modest, just the name, the word attorney, and the hours. Inside, a receptionist who looked like she'd been there since the beginning told them Mr. Wald was expecting them, which was true because Grayson had called the day before and told the receptionist he needed to discuss a historic adoption matter with the attorney and that it was personal, not legal. That phrasing, he'd told Vivian in the car, was less threatening than involving your client history, but still clear enough that Wald would know what it was about. Preston Wald was 79 years old and looked it, the particular thinness that comes in very old age, the careful way he moved as if he'd had some experience of falls, a face that had gotten more honest with time, the way some faces do. He was behind a desk when they came in, and he looked at Vivian when she entered, and something moved through his face that he immediately tried to control. He recognized you, Grayson said, quietly, at her shoulder. She'd seen it too. Mr. Wald, she said. Thank you for seeing us. He nodded slowly. He was looking at her with the expression of a man who had been expecting something like this for 30 years, and wasn't sure whether the arrival of it was a relief or a reckoning. Probably, Vivian thought, both. You look like her, he said. His voice was thin but clear. Like the other girl. Yes, Vivian said. I know. Sit down, he said. They sat. He was quiet for a long time, with his hands folded on the desk. Then, I'm going to say something before you ask me anything. I'm going to say it because I've been carrying it for a long time and I'm tired, and because you deserve to hear it before anything else. He looked at Vivian. What was done was wrong. The separation was wrong. I knew it was wrong at the time. I was not the architect of it, but I was part of the machinery that made it happen, and I've had a long time to sit with that. The room was very quiet. Tell us what happened, Vivian said. He talked for nearly an hour. The doctor, a man named Harlan Reese, 2 years dead now, had been the center of it. He had worked with Meridian Family Services for almost 2 decades, and in the early 90s he had developed a quiet practice of separating twins without documentation. The reasons varied. Sometimes an adoptive family could only take one child. Sometimes the separation served financial arrangements that Wald described obliquely and with evident shame. Sometimes it was simply that the doctor believed, with what Wald called a particular kind of arrogance, that twins had better outcomes independently and had taken it upon himself to act on that belief without asking anyone else's permission. Vivian and Claire's birth mother had been a young woman, 19, unmarried, who had come to Meridian with the intention of placing both children together. She had signed paperwork consenting to a joint placement. What she had signed and what actually happened were 2 different things. The paperwork was, according to Wald, adjusted after the fact, which was one of several practices that formed the basis of the 1998 lawsuit. Her name, Vivian said, our birth mother. Wald looked at her carefully. Her name was Annalise Sorber. She would be about 52 now. He paused. Whether she's living where she is, I genuinely don't know. She left the state in the late 90s. She contacted me once, in 2001, asking about the placement records. I told her the records were sealed. That was... He stopped. That was not the most honest conversation I've had in my life. Grayson's jaw tightened slightly. Vivian had been watching him from the corner of her eye, tracking him. He was handling this well, she thought, which probably meant he was managing it the same way she was, from the inside. Why did you agree to be part of it? Grayson asked. Not accusatory, just direct. The kind of question that deserves an actual answer. Wald looked at him. Money, he said simply. And I was 49 years old and I told myself it was in the children's best interest, which is the oldest excuse in the world for doing something you know is wrong. He looked back at Vivian. I'm not asking you to accept that. I'm telling you what the truth is because you came here for the truth and you've been owed it for 30 years. Vivian looked at him for a long moment. She felt many things. She was not going to feel them in this office, in front of this man. Is there anything else? She said. Anything in the records you still have that we should know? He reached into his desk and retrieved a file folder. It was old. The tabs yellowed, the label faded. He pushed it across the desk. I kept a copy, he said. I told myself it was in case of legal liability. I think the truth is I kept it because I didn't want to pretend it hadn't happened. He folded his hands. This is the original placement documentation, the prior consent form, the one that shows what Annalee actually signed, and a contact address for her from the 2001 call. Current? I can't say, but it's where I'd start. Vivian took the folder. She did not look at it there. She held it on her lap and looked at Preston Wald and said, "Thank you," because she was a person who said what the situation required even when the situation was not the situation she had wanted. He nodded. He looked smaller than when they'd walked in, which she suspected happened sometimes when old secrets came out. Not relief exactly, but a kind of deflation. They walked back to the car in the thin autumn light, and Grayson held the passenger door for her without making it a thing. And she got in, and he put the folder in the back seat and started the engine. He drove for about 5 minutes before he said anything. You okay? No, she said. For the second time that week, she was getting better in some terrible way at being honest about that. I know. He didn't try to fix it. We don't have to decide anything about any of it right now. She looked out the window at Springfield going past, gas stations and strip malls and parking lots, a city that did not know or care about what had just happened in a small office near its downtown center. She wanted us together, Vivian said. Annalee. She signed for a joint placement. Yeah. She tried to find out what happened in 2001. Yeah. Vivian said nothing for a while. She was thinking about a 19-year-old who had made a decision about her children and had it taken from her, and about the 30 years that had followed that moment. 2 girls growing up in different states, carrying different names, living in the specific absence of something they'd both been aware of and unable to name. I want to find her, she said. Grayson glanced at her. Annalee? Yes. Okay. A pause. I want that too. She opened the folder. The contact address was handwritten at the bottom of a page in old ink. A street in Chattanooga, Tennessee. It was 25 years old. She took a photo of it with her phone and sent it to the research firm with a single instruction: find her. Then she closed the folder and held it on her lap and looked at the highway ahead of them, 3 hours back to a city where her office and her work and her carefully organized life were waiting. None of it felt exactly the same as it had when she'd left it. The research firm found Annalee Sorber in 4 days. She was 52 years old, living outside Chattanooga, not at the address from 2001, but traceable from it. Widowed. 1 son, grown. She worked at a community library. Vivian read the report at her desk on a Tuesday evening and sat with it. She thought about calling Grayson. She picked up the phone twice and put it down twice. It wasn't that she didn't want to tell him. She did. It was more that she wanted to sit with it alone for a little while first. That was her nature, and she had learned to stop apologizing for it. Annalee Sorber, 52. A library. The woman who had wanted to keep both of her daughters together and had been quietly, efficiently prevented from doing so. Vivian looked at the document and thought, I am the sum of decisions other people made before I was old enough to have opinions about them. She had thought this before years ago in a hospital room after her second surgery, when she was 14 and furious and briefly convinced that the whole world was something that was simply done to you. She had decided eventually that this was partially true and not a reason to stop moving. She thought about Claire. Claire, who had found the yellow lamp at a flea market, who had laughed in a kitchen, who had loved someone enough to make a person with him, and who had died at 27 without ever knowing she had a sister. She thought about Grayson telling her. She felt like there was someone missing from her life that she couldn't account for. She typed an email to the research firm. Arrange a means of contact. I want to write to her first. No direct approach yet. Then she closed her laptop and went to the window and stood there in the city dark and let herself feel very quietly the full weight of everything she had found and everything she had missed and everything that was improbably late with no clean edges still in front of her. She was not okay, but she was not alone in it anymore, and that she was starting to understand was something entirely different. The letter took Vivian 4 days to write, not because she didn't know what to say. She was not generally a person who struggled with words, but because every version she started felt wrong in a different way. Too formal, and it read like a legal document. Too personal, and it felt like an ambush. She wrote 6 drafts, deleted 5, and sent the 6th on a Wednesday night with the particular feeling of someone who has jumped off something and is now committed to the fall. She kept it simple in the end. She told Annalise Sorber who she was. She told her what she had found. She told her that she was not writing to demand anything or assign blame, and that she understood if Annalise needed time or chose not to respond at all. She included her personal email address, not a professional one, because that distinction felt important. She told Grayson about the letter the following day. They had settled into something by then, a loose, unspoken routine of contact that had developed without either of them designing it. A call every few days, usually in the evenings when Lily was in bed, and the particular quiet of both their apartments made conversation easier. Sometimes it was practical. What the research firm had found, what Vivian's attorney had advised about the documentation. The question of whether there was a legal avenue against the estate of Harlan Reese, who was dead, or against Preston Wald, who was old and had cooperated and whose prosecution would accomplish nothing Vivian particularly wanted. Sometimes it wasn't practical. Sometimes it was just 2 people talking across the specific distance that existed between them. Not strangers anymore. Not anything else yet either. "How do you think she'll respond?" Grayson asked about the letter. "I have no idea," Vivian said. "That's the part I can't model. I've handled a lot of difficult conversations, but they've all been in contexts where I understand the other person's incentives. I don't know what Annalise Sorber wants from this, if she wants anything." "She might not want anything," Grayson said. "She might just want to know you're okay." Vivian considered that. "That's an optimistic reading." "I'm not always optimistic. I just think parents who give up children, especially under the circumstances she was under, they usually carry it. The wanting to know part doesn't go away." She thought about this for a long time after they hung up. Grayson had a particular quality she was still mapping, an emotional directness that wasn't aggressive, just present. He said what he thought without performing certainty about it, which was different from most people she dealt with, who either overstated their confidence or hedged so completely that they said nothing at all. She wasn't sure yet what to do with that quality. So she filed it, the way she filed things she hadn't finished processing. What? Annalise Sorber replied in 9 days. The email came at 7 in the morning, and Vivian read it at her kitchen table with coffee. She was actually drinking this time, which she took as a sign that she was getting slightly better at navigating things she couldn't control. The email was short. Annalise's writing was plain and careful, each sentence earning its place. She said she had been waiting for a contact like this for 20 years. She said she had known, when the record sealed in 2001 and her inquiry went nowhere, that there was something wrong about what had happened, but she had had no money for lawyers and no way to push harder, and eventually life had moved on in the way life does. Her marriage, her son, the years. She said she thought about her daughters every birthday, both birthdays March 14th. She said she was glad Vivian had found her. She said she was sorry, and she repeated this twice, in different parts of the email, in the specific way someone does when they've been carrying the weight of a single apology for decades. She also said, in the second paragraph, "I was told about Claire. I found out years ago. I'd been searching quietly, and I found a record of her adoption, and then later, an obituary. I am so sorry for your loss, and for the loss of the man she left behind, and for her little girl. I think about them too." Vivian read that paragraph 3 times. She forwarded the email to Grayson with no message. He called her 12 minutes later. "She knew about Claire," he said. "Yes." She was searching for years. She found the obituary. Yes. A silence. How are you doing with this? Vivian looked out her kitchen window. The city was doing its morning thing, indifferent and alive. I'm doing, she said. I wrote back. I asked if she'd be willing to speak on the phone. Good. I don't know if I'm ready to meet her in person yet. That's okay. I'm aware that I keep saying I'm not ready for things, she said, and heard a slight edge in her own voice, directed at herself, not him. I'm aware that it's a pattern. It's not a character flaw, Grayson said. You're dealing with a lot. So are you. Yeah, but I've had 5 years of practice at being ambushed by things I didn't see coming. You're newer at it. She considered pushing back on that, then decided it was accurate enough to leave alone. She said she thinks about your family, Vivian said. In the email. A pause. I read it. She found Claire's obituary. I know. His voice was quiet. I don't quite know what to do with that yet. Neither do I. We should probably just add it to the pile, he said, and something in his delivery was dry enough that she found herself exhaling in a way that was almost a laugh, the kind that escapes before you authorize it. The pile is getting large, she said. I've got a good pile, he said. I've been managing a pile for years. Come on. This time she did laugh, briefly, and it caught her off guard the way it sometimes did around him. She covered it by picking up her coffee cup, even though she was on the phone and he couldn't see her doing it. The question of Lily had been present in the background of everything for weeks, patient and unaddressed, the way certain questions are when everyone involved is trying to be careful. Vivian had not asked to meet her. Grayson had not offered it. They had been, without discussing it, mutually protective of that particular step, aware that it was different in kind from everything else they'd navigated, that a child was not a document or a record or a conversation you could prepare for adequately. But Lily was 7 and perceptive, and Grayson had not told her what was happening, and she was apparently noticing things. She asked me about the phone calls, Grayson told Vivian on a Thursday night. What did she ask? She asked who I kept talking to in the evenings. She said she'd noticed I was in a better mood lately, which, he paused, and she could hear the slight discomfort in it, is what she actually said. Her exact words. She noticed you're in a better mood. She's observant. A pause. I told her I'd been talking to someone from work. That's technically true. I know, but she's 7, not 5. She looked at me like she knew there was more, and she was filing it. Vivian said nothing for a moment. What do you want to do? I want to tell her the truth, he said, which is that I met someone who has a connection to her mom, and we've been figuring out what that means. He paused. But I also don't want to. I don't know how to introduce what you are to her without it being a lot to put on a kid. What I am, Vivian said, slowly, turning the phrase over. I'm her mother's sister, her aunt. The word aunt sat in the air between them. Yeah, Grayson said. That's a real word, she said. That's a real thing. It is. She sat with that for a moment. Aunt. Not an abstraction or a biological fact buried in a DNA report, but a word that children used that meant something specific in the architecture of a family, a word that applied to her in which she had never in her life expected to apply to her. Tell her, Vivian said. Tell her the truth in whatever amount makes sense for her age. And then she stopped. If she wants to meet me, I'd like that. But only if she wants to. She'll want to, Grayson said. There was a certainty in his voice that was not performing confidence. He simply knew his kid. He told Lily the following Saturday morning, over breakfast. He told Vivian about it that afternoon, how he had sat Lily down with her cereal and explained, in simple and honest language, that he had met a woman who turned out to be Mama's twin sister, a sister neither of them had known about, because they had been separated when they were babies, and something had gone wrong with the records. He had told her that this woman's name was Vivian, and that she was a real person who was not Mama and would never be Mama, but who was family. Lily had listened to all of this with her focused, data-collecting attention. Then she had said, Does she look like Mama? Yes, Grayson had said. Very much. Lily was quiet for a moment. Is that going to make you sad? Maybe a little, Grayson said. But it's okay to be a little sad about things. You know that. I know. She ate a spoonful of cereal. Can I meet her? If you want to. I want to. Grayson relayed all of this to Vivian on the phone, and Vivian listened carefully, and when he got to I want to, she was quiet for a moment in a way that was not hesitation, but something more like preparation. Okay, she said. Yeah? Yes, she said. Tell me when. They met on a Sunday at Grayson's apartment. Vivian had suggested neutral ground, the way she always did, but Grayson had said gently that Lily would be more comfortable on home territory, and Vivian had recognized that he was right, even though being in his space was its own kind of complicated. She drove herself. She had been to the neighborhood before. I passed through it on a work-related visit weeks ago before any of this, but she had not been to the building, and finding the parking and getting to the entrance and riding the elevator to the fourth floor took on a slightly surreal quality. The elevator being the same elevator and also not the same elevator, if that made any sense, which it didn't particularly, but that was the situation. She knocked. He opened the door. Behind him, in the hallway, was Lily. Vivian had prepared for the fact that Lily would look like Claire. What she had not fully prepared for was the specific quality of the looking. Not just the features, which were Claire's forehead and Claire's eyes, and something of Grayson's jaw in miniature, but the way she held herself, the stillness in her. A 7-year-old who did not rush forward or hang back but simply stood there, with her hands at her sides, and looked at Vivian with the clear and undefended attention of someone who had decided to see a thing accurately. Hi, Lily said. Hi, Vivian said. A pause. Lily tilted her head, studying. You really do look like her, she said. Like the pictures. Yes, Vivian said. I know. Is that okay? Lily considered this with the seriousness the question deserved. I think so, she said. You're not her, though. No, I'm not. You're different, Lily said. Not as a judgment, just as an observation, a fact she was cataloging. She smiled more. She paused. But you haven't really smiled yet, so maybe you do too. Grayson, from somewhere behind Lily, made a sound that was diplomatically ambiguous. Vivian looked at this child, this specific, particular child who had inherited her mother's directness and was currently using it to size up a stranger with the face of her dead mother. And she felt something happen in her chest that she had no category for. Not grief, not joy. Something that required both and had no name that she knew. That's fair, she said to Lily. I'm a little nervous. Lily absorbed this information. Then she took 2 steps forward and held out her hand, not for a hug, but for a handshake, with the formality of someone who had decided that introductions should be done properly. Vivian shook it. I'm Lily, Lily said. I know you already know that, but it seemed right to say. It was right, Vivian said. I'm Vivian. I know that too. Lily released her hand and stepped back. Dad made soup. You should come in. The apartment was smaller than Vivian had pictured and more lived in the specific way of a home that had been maintained but had not been decorated beyond function, where the furniture was chosen for durability rather than aesthetics, and the available wall space was occupied by Lily's artwork and a few framed photographs. Vivian noticed those photographs. She did not let herself look at them directly. Not yet. Lunch was soup from a recipe Grayson said he'd borrowed from a neighbor and had been making for 3 years. He was a competent cook in the same way he was competent at most things, not showy about it, just getting the result. Lily sat across from Vivian and ate steadily and asked questions with the matter-of-fact curiosity of someone who had been told that questions were acceptable. Do you have kids? Lily asked. No, Vivian said. Why not? Lily, Grayson said. It's okay, Vivian said. She looked at Lily. I've been focused on work, and I haven't found the right circumstances. Lily thought about this. What are the right circumstances? I haven't fully figured that out. That's okay, Lily said reasonably. Dad says some things take time to figure out. He says he's still figuring things out and he's old. I'm 32, Grayson said. That's pretty old, Lily said, not unkindly. Vivian looked at her soup to avoid the expression on her face that would have been visible if she hadn't. After lunch, Grayson took the dishes to the kitchen, and Lily migrated to the couch with a book, and Vivian stayed at the table. The apartment had a particular quality of afternoon light, warm, coming in from the western window at a low angle, and she sat in it and looked at the wall nearest to her. There was a photograph of Claire. She had known there would be. She had known it, and she had been managing the knowledge of it since she walked in, had been tracking it in her peripheral vision without looking directly at it. But sitting in the quiet of the afternoon, with the soup done and Lily occupied and Grayson in the kitchen, the moment arrived and she let it. It was a casual photo. The beach one Grayson had mentioned, July, Claire laughing at something, caught slightly off balance by whoever was holding the camera. She was in a yellow sundress, and her hair was loose, and she looked entirely unself-conscious, entirely present, entirely herself. Vivian looked at her own face in another person's body. She looked at the alive version of what she might have had, what they might have had. The beach trips, and the bad cooking, and the arguments, and the late-night phone calls, and the ordinary years of knowing each other. It didn't make her cry. She wasn't a person who cried easily, and this didn't reach that particular register. It reached something deeper and quieter, a low, sustained ache, the kind you feel in the body rather than the throat, the kind that doesn't go away but which you can, eventually, carry without it stopping you. She was really happy that day, Lily said. Vivian turned. Lily had come off the couch silently, book still in hand, and was standing a few feet away looking at the same photograph. She looks it, Vivian said. She laughed a lot. Lily was quiet for a moment. I don't remember her voice exactly anymore. Dad plays videos sometimes, so I don't forget it. She paused. Is that sad? Remembering her? Forgetting. Vivian looked at her carefully. 7 years old, asking whether the forgetting was sad. I think, she said slowly, that the fact that you're trying to hold on to it means it matters. That's not sad. That's love. Lily considered this with the gravity she brought to things that required it. Then she said, quietly, I'm glad you found us. Vivian said nothing for a moment. There was nothing immediately available that was adequate to that sentence from a 7-year-old. I'm glad too, she said finally. Very glad. Lily nodded, satisfied, and went back to the couch with her book. Bam. Grayson came out of the kitchen and found Vivian still at the table, hands around a glass of water, looking at the photograph. He could tell from the set of her shoulders that something had shifted. Not a collapse, nothing dramatic. Just the quiet alteration of a person who has let something land. He sat down across from her, not at the head of the table, but across, the way they'd been all afternoon, and he was quiet for a moment. She asked if she could see you again, he said. Lily. She pulled me aside in the kitchen. Vivian looked away from the photograph. She did? She said, and I'm quoting, I want to see her again because she seems like someone who needs to see more good things. He paused. I don't know exactly where she gets it from. Vivian was looking at him. That's... She stopped. Started again. She's remarkable. I know. He said it without a trace of performance. Just, I know. The plain fact of it. Vivian looked at the photograph again for a moment, then back at him. I thought this would be harder, she said. Being here. Seeing all of it. Is it not? It's hard, she said, but it's the right kind of hard. She paused, reaching for the right words. I've spent my whole life managing difficulty at a distance, processing things in systems, through structures. I've been very good at it. A pause. I think I've also been very lonely. He didn't respond immediately. He let it be what it was. I don't think Claire was lonely, she said. From everything you've told me, I think she had the thing I didn't know I was missing. You can have things too, he said, not as a promise, not as a romantic declaration, just as a fact, offered plainly. You're not running out of time. She looked at him for a long moment. There was, between them, the complicated territory of everything they were to each other. The sister's widower, the sister he'd never known existed, The two people who had found each other through the worst possible route and were now sitting in an apartment on a Sunday afternoon in the particular intimacy of people who have been through something hard together. "I know," she said, and she meant it in a way she hadn't quite until today. From the couch came the sound of Lily turning pages, steady and unhurried. Outside, the city was doing what it always did. The afternoon light shifted, a degree warmer, and lay across the table between them. Grayson refilled her water glass. She didn't tell him not to. Neither of them said anything else for a while, and it was the most comfortable silence Vivian Cross had sat in for as long as she could honestly remember. The call with Annalee happened on a Tuesday evening in November, 2 weeks after the Sunday at Grayson's apartment. Vivian sat at her kitchen table with her phone on speaker and a glass of water she wasn't drinking, and she waited while the line rang, and when a woman's voice answered, slightly rough, slightly careful, like someone who had been rehearsing what to say and wasn't sure the rehearsal had helped, Vivian said, "Annalee, it's Vivian." A silence, and then, "I know, I've been sitting here for an hour." "So have I," Vivian said. They were quiet together for a moment. Two strangers who were not strangers, sitting in different cities with the same strange weight between them. Annalee's voice was warm in the way that voices are when someone has spent a long life talking to people who needed something from them. Librarians had that, Vivian thought. Teachers, too. A quality of patient presence. She was not what Vivian had expected, which meant Vivian hadn't known what to expect, which was increasingly becoming the defining condition of the past several months. "I want to ask you something first," Annalee said. "Before anything else, I need you to know that you can say no. All right?" Was she happy? Her voice was steady, but the effort was audible. "Claire, was she happy?" Vivian thought about everything Grayson had told her. The flea market lamp, the catastrophically ambitious cooking, the way Claire cried at surprising things and not at predictable ones. The architectural pivot because she was more interested in how people moved through spaces. The woman in the yellow dress on the beach, laughing, caught off balance, entirely alive. "Yes," Vivian said. From everything I've been told, she was genuinely happy. She had a family she loved, work she cared about, and a life she'd built her own way. She paused. "I know that's secondhand, but I trust the source." Annalee made a sound that was somewhere between an exhale and something else. "Thank you," she said. "I've needed that for a long time." "I know." "And you?" Annalee's voice shifted. "Are you?" "I'm working on it," Vivian said, which was what she said to Grayson, which was the truest shorthand she had for her current condition. Annalee seemed to understand this without needing it explained. "That's enough," she said. "Working on it is enough." They talked for an hour and 40 minutes. Vivian had not expected to talk that long. She had prepared for 20 minutes of careful, bounded exchange. What happened instead was something more unruly and more necessary. Annalee talking about the pregnancy at 19, the decision, the way she had believed she was doing the right thing by the girls, the specific horror of finding out, years later, that what she had signed and what had happened were two different things. She did not perform her guilt. She simply described the years and the shape grief had taken in them, and the way she'd had to learn to keep living anyway, which was a skill, she said, not a character trait. You learned it the hard way, or you didn't learn it at all. "I had a son," she said. "He's 26 now. He knows about you. Both of you. I told him years ago because I couldn't keep it from him." A pause. "He wants to meet you, whenever you're ready. No pressure. He said to say that it's his own curiosity, not mine, so don't feel like you're obligated by—" "Tell him I'd like to meet him too," Vivian said. "When things settle." A silence. "You're easier to talk to than I expected," Annalee said. "People say that sometimes," Vivian said. "I think it's because I don't bother with small talk. It either reads as direct or cold, depending on the context." "It reads as honest," Annalee said. "I appreciate honest." "Good," Vivian said, "because I don't have a lot of other settings." Annalee laughed, a real one, sudden and surprised. And Vivian sat in her kitchen and listened to the laugh of the woman who had given her a birthday and a face and a twin sister. And she felt something loosen in her chest, something old and long held, a tension she had carried so far back she'd stopped noticing it had a source. By the end of the call, they had agreed to meet in person in the spring, somewhere between their cities, a middle point, neutral ground. They agreed to write in the meantime. Annalie said she was better in writing. She thought things through on paper. Vivian said she understood that. After she hung up, she sat alone in the apartment for a long time, not managing anything, not processing toward a next step, just sitting in the fact of it. A mother she had never known, a brother she hadn't been aware existed, a sister she had found only in photographs and the memories of the man who had loved her. The family she had never had and was apparently late and imperfect and with no clean lines, getting to have now. Yet, December arrived the way December does in a northern city, with a kind of insistence, the temperature dropping decisively, the light going gray and early. Grayson's last day at Callaway and Vance came and went with the kind of underwhelming finality that endings often have, a small gathering, some cake, a card that everyone had signed and which said largely nothing, the way group cards do. Marcus cried slightly, which surprised everyone, including Marcus. Grayson shook hands and cleaned out his desk and took the elevator down for the last time and stood on the sidewalk outside the building in the cold and thought, well, he had a job offer already, had had it for 2 weeks, a project management role at a smaller firm, less money initially, but a cleaner structure and the kind of work that had more substance to it. He had taken it. He had told Lily over dinner and she had said, good. The other place made you tired, which was, as Grayson had relayed to Vivian later that evening, not wrong. He and Vivian talked every day now. It had shifted from every few days to every day without either of them deciding it, the way certain things shift, incrementally, and then all at once, and then you realize the ground has changed and you've been standing on the new ground for a while without noticing the transition. He would call her after Lily went to bed, or she would text first, or he would send her something, an article, a photograph Lily had taken of an interesting cloud, a piece of news about the Wald situation, which was winding toward a formal complaint to the Illinois bar that Vivian's attorney was filing on her behalf. Not a prosecution, a record. Something in the official accounting that named what had been done and attached it permanently to the people who had done it. Is that enough? He had asked her once. The complaint. Does it feel like enough? She had thought about it carefully, the way she thought about everything. Harlan Reese is dead, she said. Preston Wald is 79 and cooperated. The agency doesn't exist. What I can do is make sure the record exists, that someone, somewhere, can look back and see that this happened and that it wasn't nothing. A pause. Claire deserves to be in the record, even if she's not here for it. He had not said anything for a moment. Then, yeah, she does. The conversations had layers now, practical things on the surface, the job, the filing, Lily's school project on weather patterns that had somehow grown into a full meteorological presentation. And underneath, everything else. The way two people who have been through something strange and large together start to know each other in the specific way that can't be rushed or fabricated. The way knowledge accumulates without ceremony. He knew she couldn't sleep well when something was unresolved. She knew he deflected with humor when he was uncomfortable, and that the deflection was usually a signal worth noting. He knew that the wheelchair was matter-of-fact to her in most contexts, and that the one place she hated unsolicited help was in public, where it came with a particular quality of patronizing concern that she had spent years learning to manage without getting angry. She knew that he still slept on one side of the bed and had not been able to entirely stop doing it, and that he had told her this not as a confession but as a fact, and that telling her had cost him something small and real. They were not pretending to be something they weren't. They were also not pretending not to be something they were, which was two people who had been pulled into each other's gravity by an impossible set of circumstances and had found, against all odds, that they fit. Neither of them had said this plainly yet. They were both, for different reasons, careful people. And there was still the other thing, the shadow of Claire, the face in the photographs, the question of whether what Grayson felt and what Vivian felt could be separated cleanly from the thing that had drawn them together. That question was going to need addressing eventually. They both knew it. They were, in their different ways, working up to it. It was Lily who forced the issue. because Lily was 7 and had not yet developed the adult capacity for indefinite strategic postponement. It happened on a Saturday in mid-December. Vivian had come over. She came over on Saturdays now, occasionally, with an ease that had developed gradually from that first Sunday lunch. She and Lily had an ongoing project. Lily had decided that Vivian needed to understand clouds properly and had taken it upon herself to provide instruction. Vivian had accepted this arrangement with a straight face and a genuine willingness to learn that Lily found appropriate and Grayson found quietly devastating in a way he couldn't entirely account for. They were on the couch, Lily's cloud journal open between them, and Lily was explaining the distinction between nimbostratus and cumulonimbus with the authority of a small professor, and Vivian was asking questions that were, to Grayson's eye, not performative but actual. When Lily looked up from the journal and said, out of nowhere, "Do you like my dad?" Vivian's expression didn't change, but something very slight shifted behind it. "Yes," she said, "I do." "Like as a friend or different?" "Lily," Grayson said from the kitchen doorway. "I'm just asking," Lily said, not defensively, informational. "Because you look at him differently than you look at other people." "I look at him differently," Vivian said carefully. "Yeah, like you're paying more attention." Lily tilted her head. "It's the same way he looks at you, I noticed." A silence. Grayson had come fully into the room now. He was leaning against the doorframe with his arms crossed, and the expression of a man who had lost control of a situation he wasn't entirely sure he'd wanted to control. "Lily," he said, "this is a private kind of question." "But I want to know," Lily said, without particular stubbornness. "Because if something is happening, I want to know. It's my family too." She looked between them. "I'm not upset. I just want to know what's real." The room was very quiet. Vivian looked at Lily for a long moment, this specific, unmistakable child who had her mother's directness and her father's steadiness, and who had just, at 7 years old, said something that cut straight to the center of things, with a precision that most adults spent their entire lives trying to achieve. "I want to know what's real, too," Vivian said, quietly. To Lily, but not only to Lily. She looked at Grayson when she said it. He looked back at her, and the thing that had been in the background of their evenings and their conversations and the Saturday afternoons on this couch was suddenly, simply, in the room. "I think," Grayson said from the doorway, and his voice was steady but not effortless, "that we need to have a conversation, me and Vivian, after you go to bed." Lily considered this. "Okay," she said, "but tell me tomorrow." "Tell you what?" "Whatever you decide." She looked at him with her father's particular blend of patience and practicality. "Because I already know what I want, so you two can figure out what you want." Grayson stared at his daughter. "What do you want?" "For her to stay," Lily said simply. Then she looked back down at her cloud journal and pointed to a photograph of a cumulonimbus. "This one can produce tornadoes," she told Vivian. "That's why it's important to identify it early." Vivian looked at the photograph. Her hands, in her lap, were not entirely steady. "I see," she said. "Good to know." They talked after Lily went to bed. Not on the couch, not at the kitchen table. They ended up on the small balcony off the living room, which was cold enough that they both had their coats on, standing at the railing with the city below them doing its nighttime thing, the particular version of quiet that cities get after 10 when the traffic thins. Grayson started. "I have to say something first," he said, "and I need to say it the right way." "Okay." "When I walked into that office 5 months ago and saw you," he stopped. Started again. "My first reaction was about Claire. I know that. You know that. That's where this started, and I'm not going to pretend it isn't the architecture of the whole thing." He looked at the city. "But the person I've been talking to every day for the last 2 months, the person who sat with my daughter and learned about clouds because Lily wanted her to, that's you. Not her echo, not her face. You." He turned to look at her. "And I'm aware that I'm in complicated territory, and I'm aware that you have every reason to be cautious about where this is pointing, and I'm not—" He exhaled. "I'm not asking you for anything right now. I just needed you to know that when I look at you, I see you." The city hummed below them. A car passed somewhere a few streets over. The cold was sharp and clean. Vivian was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was measured but not distant. The difference between someone who is being careful and someone who is being careful because what they're saying matters. I've spent my adult life, she said, building systems so that I don't have to be vulnerable to things I can't control. I'm good at it. I've built a career on it. She looked at her hands on the railing. When you walked into my office 5 months ago, I fired you partly because I recognized, somewhere underneath the professional justification, that you were a variable I couldn't account for. She paused. I knew there was something. I didn't want to know what it was. I figured. I'm not easy, she said. I want to be clear about that. I'm not warm naturally. I manage things instead of feeling them, and when I do feel them, I'm often late to it and not graceful about it. I have a body that requires more logistics than most, and I'm not always patient about that either. She looked at him. I'm not the person you lost. I know that, and I'm not trying to be. I know that too. She held his gaze. What I am, she said, is someone who, for the first time in a very long time, doesn't want to manage something at a distance. She paused. That's new. And it's mostly your fault. Something shifted in his face. Not a full smile, something quieter, more certain. My fault. You and your daughter, she said, who is, for the record, entirely too perceptive for a 7-year-old. She gets that from her mother. The sentence landed gently between them, without grief exactly, but with the full weight of everything they both knew. Claire's name in the space between them not as a ghost, but as a fact. A person who had been real, who had mattered, who was still present in the life and the child and the history that had brought two people to a cold balcony on a December night. She would have liked this, Grayson said quietly. Claire, she would have... He stopped. I've been trying to figure out how to say this without it being strange, but I think there's no way to say it without it being strange, so I think she would have been glad that you found us, that Lily has you. Vivian looked at him for a long time. I think, she said, she would have told us both we were taking too long. He laughed, a real one, sudden and unguarded, the kind that you can't manufacture. It hit the cold air and disappeared. Yeah, he said. That sounds right. She reached out and put her hand over his on the railing, not taking it, not a dramatic gesture, just placing her hand on top of his. Steady, present. He turned his hand and held hers. They stood there in the cold for a while, looking at the city, not saying anything else, because some things don't need to be said once they've already been understood. The spring came slowly, the way springs do in northern cities, reluctantly and starts and stops. A warm week followed by a cold snap, followed by something that finally committed. There was a day in late April when all of it converged. Annalise Sorber drove up from her Middle Point meeting location. They had chosen a town roughly equidistant from Chattanooga and the city, a place with a good park and a decent restaurant and no particular significance to anyone. And Vivian drove down with Grayson and Lily, which was itself a thing that had required some conversation and had ultimately felt right. Lily had asked, when told about the meeting, who Annalise was. She's the woman who gave birth to your mom and to Vivian, Grayson had said. I guess technically she'd be your grandmother. Lily had thought about this with her characteristic thoroughness. I have a grandmother I've never met. Until now. Okay, Lily said. Does she know about clouds? Grayson had not known how to answer that, and had texted Vivian about it, and Vivian had texted back. Tell her she can teach her. Lily had accepted this. The meeting was not the neat resolution that stories sometimes pretend convergences are. It was messy and human and imperfect in the specific ways that real things are. Annalise was shorter than Vivian had imagined, with gray in her hair that she hadn't bothered to color and the kind of face that showed its years honestly. She saw Vivian in the parking lot before anyone had a chance to prepare, and she stopped walking and pressed her hand to her mouth and stood there for a moment just looking. And Vivian stood still and let her look because that was what the moment required. Then Annalise lowered her hand and said, in a voice that was only slightly unsteady, You look so much like I imagined. I look like Claire, Vivian said. You look like yourself, Annalise said. Claire looked like herself too. You're different. I can see it already. They stood in a parking lot on a Tuesday in April and looked at each other. The 19-year-old girl who had signed a form and the woman that form had partially made. And neither of them cried, and neither of them moved to embrace immediately, and neither of them tried to make it something cleaner than it was. Then Lily appeared between them, having escaped from Grayson's line of sight, and looked up at Annalie with her cloud journal held against her chest and said, "Hi, I'm Lily. My mom was Vivian's twin. That makes us related somehow." Annalie looked down at this child with an expression that was very close to breaking. "Yes," she said very softly. "It does." "Do you know anything about clouds?" Annalie blinked. "A little, not much." "That's okay," Lily said. "Vivian didn't either. I'm teaching her." She held out her hand for the handshake she had apparently decided was her standard greeting for significant introductions. "I can teach you too, if you want." Annalie shook the small offered hand with the care of someone receiving something fragile and precious. "I would like that," she said. Grayson arrived at Vivian's shoulder and put his hand briefly at the small of her back. A quiet steadying, present, and then not. And Vivian felt it and was glad of it. They had lunch at the restaurant, all of them together, and the conversation had the halting and then flowing quality of people who are trying to find the shape of a relationship that has no established template. Annalie told them about her son Marcus, who had not been able to make the drive but had sent a message that Annalie read aloud. "Tell Vivian she has a brother who would like to meet her when she's ready and who is very bad at cooking, so if she's good at it, they'll get along fine." Vivian said she was not good at cooking, which produced a laugh, and Grayson said that was fine because he was, which produced a different kind of laugh. Lily showed Annalie 6 pages of the cloud journal. Annalie asked real questions. Lily approved of her. After lunch, they walked in the park, the 4 of them, with the particular configuration of it still unfamiliar but not uncomfortable, finding the rhythm of walking together. Lily ranging ahead and doubling back the way kids do when they're allowed to move freely. Annalie walked beside Vivian and talked quietly about the town she grew up in, the library where she worked, the ordinary texture of a life lived forward after an irrecoverable mistake, which was not the same as a ruined life, she said. She said this carefully, not as consolation, but as fact. "I spent a long time thinking I had failed you both," Annalie said. "I still think that some days. I made the decision I thought was right, and then had it taken from me. And the difference between those two things," she paused, "I had to figure out which one I was actually carrying. It took a long time." "And now?" Vivian said. "Now I carry it honestly," Annalie said. "I don't pretend it was fine, but I stopped letting it be the only thing about me." She glanced at Vivian. "What about you? What are you carrying?" Vivian thought about this as they walked, the park green and new around them, Lily's voice auditing clouds in the middle distance. "I'm carrying a sister I didn't get to know," she said. "I think I'll carry that for the rest of my life." She paused. "But I'm also carrying what she left. Her daughter, the man she loved, the family she made, which is somehow, improbably, becoming something that includes me." Annalie nodded slowly. "That's not a small thing." "No," Vivian said. "It isn't." They walked for a while in silence, and it was the comfortable kind. That evening, driving back, Lily fell asleep in the back seat before they'd hit the highway, the cloud journal still open across her lap. Grayson drove and Vivian sat in the passenger seat and watched the evening light change over the landscape. "How are you?" he said. She thought about it properly, the way she always tried to with him now instead of defaulting to management. "Better than I expected," she said. "Worn out, but the right kind. The right kind seems to be happening more often." "It does." She looked at the road. "She's not what I expected. Annalie, what did you expect?" "More damage, maybe. More obvious damage." She paused. "She's just a person who did the best she could and then kept going, which sounds simple but isn't." "No," he agreed, "it isn't." In the back seat, Lily made a small sound in her sleep and shifted, the journal sliding. Vivian reached back automatically, without thinking, and steadied it. Put it back across Lily's lap. Grayson glanced in the rearview mirror, then at Vivian. He said nothing. She became aware of what she had done. The automatic reach, the steadying, the uncalculated, unmeasured thing. She looked at her own hand, put it back in her lap. "You don't have to overthink that," Grayson said quietly. "I'm not." "You are." She looked out the window. The landscape was going blue in the evening light, fields and tree lines, the long, flat stretch of highway. "I'm not a natural at this," she said. "The instinctive things." "You just did it instinctively." "One time." "One time is how it starts." She was quiet for a moment. Then, because she had been practicing honesty and it was becoming incrementally easier, "I'm afraid of wanting something this much." He drove for a moment before he answered. "I know that feeling exactly," he said. "I spent 5 years not wanting things because wanting things meant they could be taken." He glanced at her briefly. "It took me a long time to understand that that wasn't protection. It was just loneliness with a justification attached." She held that for a while, turning it over. "I'm working on it," she said. "I know you are." He reached across the center console and put his hand over hers for a moment. The same steady gesture she had offered him on the balcony in December. Return now. Then he put his hand back on the wheel. The highway stretched ahead of them, clear and long, the city reappearing on the horizon in the particular way cities do at night. A glow first, then definition, then all the specific lit windows of all the specific lives going on inside them. Yep. There is a moment that happens sometimes, in the particular lives of people who have been through loss and come out the other side still standing, not unmarked, not the same, but standing, where the weight they have been carrying doesn't disappear but shifts, not lifted away, just redistributed, carried differently, in a new configuration that includes other people under it too. It doesn't feel like what you imagined recovery would feel like, because it doesn't feel like recovery. It feels more ordinary than that, and more permanent. On a Saturday in May, Grayson and Vivian took Lily to the park near the apartment. The same park he had been taking her to for years. The one with the old swings and the gravel path, and the bench by the duck pond where he had sat through more than a few difficult mornings, just existing, just maintaining. Lily ran ahead to the swings with the urgency of someone who has been in a car too long. Grayson and Vivian walked behind her at the pace of two people who don't need to hurry. The afternoon was the warm and generous kind, the air doing the specific thing it does in May when summer is coming and the light is still clean and everything smells like possibility. Lily reached the swings, grabbed the chains, turned around. "Push me," she announced. "Push yourself," Grayson called back. "I want to go higher than I can go myself." "You can go plenty high." "Dad?" He made a show of sighing and walked over. Lily got on the swing and he pushed her once, twice, and she went up and came back laughing, and the laugh was a high, clear sound in the open air, entirely free, the kind of laugh that children have before they learn to monitor it. Vivian stood a few feet away, watching. She thought about a lot of things in that moment, not linearly, not as a list of events, but the way you think about things when the present suddenly holds still long enough to be fully inhabited. She thought about the 19-year-old who had signed a form in 1994 and wanted her daughters kept together. She thought about a doctor who had decided he knew better, and an attorney who had chosen money over honesty, and all the small and large decisions that had cascaded outward from those original acts for 30 years, touching lives that the people making them had never considered. She thought about Claire, in the kitchen with yellow light, in a yellow dress on a beach, in a hospital bed looking at a camera with exhausted brightness 2 weeks before Lily was born. She thought about the photographs on a wall in an apartment, and a man who had loved someone enough that the grief of losing her was still, 5 years later, a constant companion, worked around and managed and still present. She thought about the version of her life she had built without knowing what was missing from it, and she thought about Lily on the swing, going higher, laughing at the sky. Lily at the height of the swing's arc looked back, the way she sometimes did at the top to see who was watching. She saw Vivian standing there. She grinned, the big, unguarded grin of a kid fully in a good moment, and waved with the hand that wasn't holding the chain. Vivian waved back. It was such a small thing. It was one of the smallest things. She felt it in her chest the way you feel things that are going to stay with you. Grayson came to stand beside her while Lily continued pumping the swing on her own, determined now to maintain the height herself. He stood close enough that their shoulders nearly touched, the way they stood sometimes, the proximity easy and unannounced. "She's going to fall off if she leans back any further," Vivian said. "She's not going to fall off. She's leaning back very far. She does this every time. She hasn't fallen off yet. The statistical sample is not large enough to be reassuring." He laughed, and she felt it more than heard it, the movement of it. "You," he said, "are going to be a very thorough parent." The word landed. They both felt it land. He hadn't meant it as a declaration. She hadn't taken it as one. But there it was, easy in the spring air, the natural phrasing of someone who had stopped thinking in provisional terms. She looked at Lily on the swing. "I'm new at it," she said, "but I learn quickly. I've noticed." She looked at him. He was looking at the swing, but there was something in his expression, the particular quality of a person who is very close to being entirely present in their own life, as close as anyone gets, which is never perfectly, but enough. "Grayson," she said. "Yeah. Thank you for coming back that second day. To the office." She paused. "When you didn't have to." He looked at her. "I had to." "I know, but still." He held her gaze for a moment. "Thank you for not having security remove me. I considered it." "I know you did." She almost smiled. She let it be an almost smile. Then she let it become an actual one. He saw it, and he did not make a thing of it, which was exactly right. He just looked at her the way he looked at her, the way Lily had noticed, paying more attention than for anything else, and then looked back at his daughter on the swing. Lily had reached a height that was genuinely impressive and was announcing this fact loudly to no one in particular. Vivian stood in the May afternoon with her shoulder close to his and watched the little girl climb the air, and the feeling that moved through her was not happiness exactly, not the simple, uncomplicated kind. It was something fuller than that, something that had grief in it and loss in it and 30 years of a mystery, and one impossible morning in an office with a face she recognized, and the long, difficult, necessary work of learning to be known by people instead of just known about. It was the feeling of a life that had more in it now than it had before. That, she thought, was enough. That was in fact everything. Lily at the top of her arc, hair flying, turning her face into the sky. Two people standing on a path in a park in May, not saying anything, which sometimes is the only language that fits. This is what remains, when the impossible finally settles into something ordinary. Not the dramatic moment of discovery, not the reunion in a parking lot, not the conversation on a cold balcony, but this. A Saturday afternoon. A child who keeps a journal of clouds. The simple, unearned, completely improbable fact of not being alone. Life does not give you back what it takes. It never has, and no amount of wishing otherwise will change that particular math. But sometimes, not always, not fairly, not on any schedule you can predict or plan for. It gives you something different, something that isn't a replacement, isn't a second chance, isn't a consolation prize, but is its own full thing, built on the ground of what you lost and shaped partly by it, and real on its own terms regardless. Grayson Hale had walked into an office 5 months ago and seen the impossible, and it had turned out to be true, and true had turned out to be the beginning of something. Vivian Cross had fired a man she should have listened to and had spent weeks trying to manage her way out of a feeling that wouldn't be managed, and the feeling had turned out to be the realest thing in her carefully constructed life. Lily Hale kept a cloud journal because the world was worth paying attention to. She was right about that. She was right about most things. The afternoon held, warm and generous, and they let it.